Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word in our special edition for news, nuggets, and insights for this week. This week, we're paying special tribute to the veterans who have served so faithfully our nation. Never has there been a time that we needed more reminder of the service that have been given to us by the founders, the forefathers, and those who fight faithfully even to this day, the veterans who have served our nation.
3 teens were arrested today for defacing the Kensington Park War Memorial overnight. The destruction includes painted messages against the military and the war in the Middle East. The 3 teens were picked up in the early morning hours after evidence was left at the scene.
Grandpa, something wrong?
Some people sure have short memories, and those who are too young to know need to be taught. Come on, I want to show you guys something.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc, champions who helped free a continent. And these are the heroes who helped end a war. You are men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor.
In the name of God and country, I learned to defy gravity.
To honor my family,
I lived in the belly of a beast.
I fixed the hearts of iron monsters.
I became a worm in the mud for dignity,
for honor,
for righteousness' sake,
for God and country.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
For you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you. I fought for you.
I fought for you.
For you.
For you.
For you.
For you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you, and I do it again.
Sit back and enjoy our program today as we talk about the veterans who have served this nation, as we pay respect to the service due, and as we tie in another set of battles, spiritual warriors, veterans that God's calling to the forefront just before the return of Jesus Christ, right here today on God's Unchanging Word in this special edition of News, Nuggets, and Insights. Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word in this special edition of News, Nuggets, and Insights. Today is Friday, November 10th, 2017, just one day before Veterans Day. Today we have several things we're going to talk about. We're going to primarily stay on Veterans Day, but of course, the news you've heard about the shooting of the church in Texas, we need to discuss that and talk about what's coming ahead and something that's rarely ever discussed in light of what's going on in the middle of these catastrophes. So we're going to talk about that today as we tie it all in to Veterans Day. So the very first thing we'll bring up, we're going to be talking about Veterans Day. Then we're going to go back, we're going to talk about the shooting in Texas and some of the events that we have to look forward to before the return of Jesus Christ. And then we're going to talk about the spiritual battle and end-time warriors that's God's calling to the forefront. And it'll be spiritual warriors just before the return of Jesus Christ. So but let me just mention at the very beginning of our program, because all of our hearts and our prayers and our love goes to all of those who died in this horrible shooting in Texas that killed 26 people and wounded 20 other. And the evil, there's nothing short of just evil that's going on in the world. And this comes on the heels of the attacks in New York. They're just driving over people and killing them. And not too long ago, the mass killings in Las Vegas. And it seems that no sooner does one just get out of your forefront than another mass killing seems to be coming into the mind of a new incident. And these incidents are rising at an ever accelerated pace. And it ought to be alarming to everyone in this nation. We're going to talk about in a little while what's going on. But first, let's talk about the veterans, because that's what this program was initially going to be. This entire program was going to be more of an uplifting reminder of all the service of what God has given, the freedoms to this nation by God, granted to this greatest nation that ever existed on the face of the earth. Veterans Day. You talk to people on the street, some people have no idea what Veterans Day is. So the easiest way to remember Veterans Day is 11-11-11. When it began back in 1918 at the close of World War I, it was decided at the armistice, at the signing of the treaty. We have a little video by the History Channel in just a second about that. On the 11th month, on the 11th day, and at 11 o'clock a.m. in the morning is when they sign the armistice, and that is when they celebrate Veterans Day every year. But it wasn't called Veterans Day in the past. It was originally called Armistice Day. Armistice Day was celebrated across many nations to commemorate the soldiers who fought in World War I. See, this holiday here is more than just a holiday for America celebrating our veterans. Countries across the world celebrate this day also, because World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars. Of course, we know that it didn't. So other nations celebrate what they still call Armistice Day in their nations. Specifically, it refers to the Armistice Treaty that was signed by the Allies and the Germany at the Copenhagen, France. The truce went into effect on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. However, in the hours between the announcement of the armistice and its enforcement deadline, fighting continued and almost 3,000 men died on the very last day of the war. So today we're going to take a moment to talk about Armistice Day through the History Channel, who gives us a brief history of what this day is all about. So here's a video from the History Channel, and I'll be right back just to go over some pictures you may have never seen on Armistice Day around the world. We'll be right back.
Soldiers from wars both old and new march down city streets. Flags hang from homes, businesses, even car antennas. Ceremonies remember those who dutifully served their nation. It's Veterans Day, or Remembrance Day, as it's known in much of the world, a time to honor members of the armed forces. And it all began in a railroad car with a document to end the war to end all wars. World War I, also known as the Great War, shocked the global community with its unprecedented toll in human life. Untold millions were killed. Germany was running low on manpower and supplies, so they agreed to sign an armistice, or truce, in the French commander Ferdinand Foch's private rail car. On the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, all was quiet on the Western Front. The fighting had ended. Exactly 1 year later, President Woodrow Wilson decreed that Americans should observe a moment of silence at 11 a.m. to remember the armistice and to embrace the peace. Other Allied nations commemorated the peaceful anniversary as well. In England and Canada, citizens wore paper poppies. Poppies had become a symbol of the armistice. The poem Flanders Field described a one-time battlefield. In Flanders Field, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. In America, the nation's first unknown soldier was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery on Armistice Day, 1921. He was a casualty of the Great War. Since that first memorial, other unknown soldiers from America's wars have been interred in the tomb. And it's become tradition for the president or one of his representatives to lay a wreath on the monument every November 11th. A resolution was passed in 1926 inviting all Americans to remember Armistice Day and the soldiers who fought so hard for peace. The idea caught on. By 1938, the day was marked with so many ceremonies and parades, Congress made it a legal holiday, giving people the day off work. After World War II and the Korean War, Americans wanted to open up the holiday to include not just World War I veterans, but all who served in combat. In 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower, a World War II vet himself, legally changed the U.S. Armistice Day to Veterans Day, honoring those who served in all American wars. For a brief time starting in 1971, Congress moved the holiday to the fourth Monday in October, giving Americans a 3-day weekend. But most people rejected the idea. The traditional date of November 11th, the anniversary of the Great War's ceasefire, was too historically important to forget. President Ford reversed the law in 1975, returning Veterans Day back to its rightful date. Over the decades, the holiday has changed with the times. Originally, it was a call for world peace. Then in the U.S., it became a day to remember war veterans. Today, Veterans Day is set aside to honor not just those who served in war, but also those who have served their nation in peace.
Well, tomorrow, somewhere around 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, someone in the government office, President Trump, of course, is overseas, so they'll have a representative lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier again, as we pay honor to our veterans on Veterans Day. It's interesting that as we pay tribute today, that the president is in the Far East, meeting with the nations that are surrounding Korea, as Korea continues to threaten a nuclear war and global catastrophe that could take place. We need to continue to pray that the efforts of the president and those nations can find a solution so that this war does not begin. Because if a war begins now on a nuclear scale, there will be no stopping it. So we need to remember that and pray about that as time goes forward, because it has gotten about as serious as it can get. In fact, in our quarterly this month, I've got on the cover the time clock that has just been moved to 2.5 minutes till midnight. This is a time clock that the nuclear physicists have put together as they look at the conditions around the world, and it is at the closest point that it has ever been since they began the clock back in the late 40s following the nuclear bombs and the dropping at World War II. We need to remember what's going on here and not put it to the back as we remember to pay honor to these veterans on this specific day. What I want to do now is I've got some pictures that you may have never seen before, and I just want to bring this out to show you around the world what it was like, the euphoria that took place at the very close of the war as the armistice was signed on that specific day. This was a picture that was from soldiers on the battlefield as they got the news. Try to imagine you're on a battlefield and you've been fighting possibly for years. Most of your friends have been killed in the trenches or have suffered the mustard gases they actually used back in World War I. And to finally be able to live through this, to be able to go home. This was pictures in London. Here's London. This was the ladies back home. You can see the fog and the celebration taking place. And going down one of their main streets as the celebrations of the euphoria was going across the entire country as it went on from around the world. Now take a look at this. This were the crowds at Trafalgar Square in London. And so, I mean, as you can see, I mean, just everybody was out celebrating. And the guy who seemed to have the best view was probably this guy right here on that pole as he climbed up to view all the crowds. I think I got one more for London. Yeah, this is a view from Buckingham Palace in London. As you can see, all the people as they were waiting for I believe the king back then to make comment about the end of the war and to give comforting words to the people in London. In America, they began to, just like in Europe, began to flood the streets and be able to celebrate the freedom that those were coming home, that the war was finally over. And here they are again, marching down the street, celebrating. And the one thing they have in common that seems to be wanting to be removed from our nation today is everywhere you went, they proudly flew the flag of the United States. Unlike what we're seeing today, that many people have lost sight of what has gone on over the last couple hundred years to protect our nation and to keep it free, and the sacrifices that people have made. And how horrible it is now that even in the sports arena, as people take knees during the national anthem of such disrespect to our nation and to the heritage that we have been given and the dishonor that has been done there. Here's another picture. This is on Broad Street in New York. As you can see, I mean, just as far as the eyes can see, the celebrations that went forth. In fact, what they have here, this is a replica. This is a miniature replica that they had in the street of the liberty, showing that the liberty was preserved for our nation and the freedom that we have today. There's no telling what this nation would have been like had the war gone differently in World War I or World War II. And so there's another battle that's coming. God talks about an end-time battle before the return of Jesus Christ and after the return of Jesus Christ. And in that battle that takes place is a spiritual warfare that's lining up right now. And you're looking at the physical as you see the disrespect to our flag and nation. And those in the Church of God need to understand something. This nation is not just America. This is a modern day Israel. And what you're looking at behind the scenes going on as the disrespect to this nation is the physical disrespect of the spiritual battle that's beginning to take place within our nation. No longer is it safe for Christians to be able to speak their own beliefs. No longer is it safe to simply say, I disagree with abortion or same-sex marriage. That view is being squelched and people are being beaten. And you will see laws changing that will eventually put people in jail for being able to express those views. One last one I think I have here. I actually got two more pictures. This was in France. These were the crowds that came in France who took a horrible beating in both wars because a lot of the war was fought in France. And you see their celebration as they're showing even in this flag. Now, I don't know if you can see this. We can pull it back up. You see way over here you got an American flag and you have a British flag and you have the French flag. So even in this here, they were flying flags representing their countries that they served so proudly. And then finally, I have a picture here of the Western Front. This was actually on the Western Front against Germany on the day of the armistice, as they took and were told about the armistice, they finally had peace, that they were going home. So I wanted to share a little bit of that with you as we play some of the videos. I've got another video that I'm going to play here in just for a second. It's called We Remember, and then we're going to talk about the carnage that took place with that church in Texas, and then we're going to draw in our news and nuggets, the spiritual battle that's lining up that we need to talk about today as we remember the veterans on Veterans Day.
Let us pray this Veterans Day in the name of those who have fallen in this country's wars.
Those who live today remember those who do not. And those who know freedom remember today those who gave up life for freedom.
Americans are united in sending one message. We honor your service. We are inspired by your sacrifice, and you have our unyielding support.
America is a force for hope in the world because we are a compassionate people. And some of the most compassionate Americans are those who have stepped forward to protect us. We must keep faith with all who have risked life and limb so that we might live in freedom and peace.
Thank you, God.
But I think it most appropriate that we recall the contribution and the sacrifice which so many men and their families have made in order to permit this country to now occupy its present position of responsibility and freedom.
Today and always pledges itself to their eternal memory. Thank you. God bless you.
When you see all of that, you begin to understand we have so much to be thankful for and grateful for in this nation. Biblical nuggets, God's chosen elect and the end-time veterans. I want to tie this in now to the shooting that took place in Texas and draw some analogies and end-time warnings that God's showing us what's going on. But I wanted to say that earlier in our program about how our hearts go out to these people, because people will start questioning faith and religion. You're beginning to see actual text messages from many in Hollywood mocking those who are praying for these people, just actually mocking God. And when you look at this church was no worse or no better than any of the other churches that are across the country. Very similar when Jesus Christ talked about those who died in his day when the wall fell on them and people want to know, well, these people were sinners than anyone else. So no, that's happened. What we're beginning to see is a nation where God's protection is being removed because we have kicked God out is going on. In this one church alone, a family of 8 members died. 8 members, and pretty much everybody in this church was wounded or killed. And as of this morning, now we're taping on Tuesday, so by the time you see this on Friday, you're going to know a lot more about this shooting than we're giving you here. But as of this morning, they said he shot 450 rounds. In that little church building, 450 rounds, and killing and wounding all of these people. So it's the deranged gunman who killed 26 churchgoers in Texas was a militant atheist who ranted on Facebook about stupid religious people. All right, so here's the first warning sign that we need to be aware of, is because we're watching militant attitudes rising up, and the militant attitude is rising up against church people, people of faith who believe in God. You're beginning to see this rant taking place against the Christian people in this nation. Now, it used to be that even if you didn't agree with it, you just accepted it. But no longer is the attitude for many across the nation being able to even accept a difference of opinion from the atheist or on the sectarian side who doesn't want anything to do with God. And he also said the stupid religious people. This rant, believe it or not, is actually being perpetuated by many in Hollywood. People you go to the movies, you pay money to go see. In the tweets, I won't even bring up some of the things that they wrote. It's absolutely horrendous what they're writing, and no one says a word about it. It's time that the churches stand up and to defend their rights and follow God's holy word and keep his commandments. Are you going to see this continue to rise at an ever alarming pace as time goes on? Going on. Devin Kelly, 26, who opened fire on worshipers in the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs yesterday, was described as creepy and weird by former schoolmates. Classmate Nina Rosanova writes on Facebook that the mass murderer used to rant on the social network about his atheist beliefs. She said he was always talking about how people who believe in God were stupid and trying to preach his atheism. Another fellow friend of theirs, fellow user Christopher Leo Longoria, replied, "I removed him from my Facebook for those same reasons. He was being super negative, sick all the time, sick." In other words, they were beginning to see that this was sick. And as I heard this morning, that he actually beat his child, starved his dog, and beat his wife, and was removed from the military where he was at. So this man has a history of violence that's going on. This is not unique. Something I want everybody to understand as we go into this weekend. This is an attitude that is rising across this nation and around the globe. When you remove God, Satan is going to feel its presence. All right, so I'm going to show you something here. All right, this is coming in. This is coming from an article written October 31st. Time of removing God's hedge. I put the question in. God says at the end time he was going to remove his hedge. And you read in Isaiah chapter 5. So are we at the time where God has began to remove his hedge? And I think we are when you begin to look at what's going on. Now look at these headlines. It says, take religion, remove God, add hashtag resistance, meet the Satanic Temple. Now this is up in the Northeast. There is actually a Satanic Temple now. It was put up in 2016, and people are flocking to it by the thousands, going through it, looking at the things that are in the Satanic Temple. It's just a regular house. They made it a museum. The picture here on your left is a picture of an Egyptian god when the Israelites left Egypt. Now look at the pictures on the inside of the Satanic Temple, and you can see the resemblance of a modern-day depiction of Satan, the symbol of God. And so here we go in bringing it into our nation. Now, when people see this, they don't think anything about it. This is just a museum. But evil is evil when you bring it in. Now, to those who don't understand the evil world, they have no idea what they're doing here when they let these things in. This is another report, and I titled it, The World Growing Without God. This is from the National Geographic, an article from last year, April 22nd, 2016. It says this, as secularism grows, atheists and agnostics are trying to expand and to diversify their ranks. That's what you're beginning to see on a spiritual level. And God says we wrestle against principalities. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. So behind the scenes, behind all the stuff that's going on, as God is being removed, the spirit that's antagonistic against God is moving in, and that's why you're seeing these spirits rising up. It says the world's newest major religion is no religion. Now, we introduced that concept last week on News and Nuggets. Go back and take a look at it. Because in the schools, we cannot bring in God as a point of order to discuss. However, because God is removed, the world of LGBT is being brought in as if it's its own religion. So what you're seeing is what the National Geographic called it last year. It is a world bringing in its own religion, which is no religion. So what you're doing is almost as if you're worshiping LGBT. And if you speak up against the LGBT, they will come after you as if you have attacked their faith. That's what you're looking at. It is an anti-God belief of what's going on. So you're seeing that from this article. In the article said, I'm just going to give you one little sentence from it. It says, more people than ever are identifying as agnostic or otherwise non-religious with potentially world-changing effects. That's what we're seeing going on right now. So you're beginning to see the world-changing effects going on because they have removed God, being non-religious or agnostic to God. And so the hatred now is rising up when people want to believe in God. It just burns the other side of those who don't, and they want to destroy and attack those people. And when you have that type of mental attitude, what happens is Satan or his demons can overtake the mind of that individual, no doubt different than the person who shot all those people in Texas. Is that just goes in and just kills everybody and then winds up killing himself. It is an attitude that seems to permeate so many mass murders that eventually they kill himself, very similar to what we've seen with Judah, who turned on Jesus Christ, who went out and hung himself after he turned Christ over to the Pharisees to be crucified. So you're seeing the same spirit warfare taking place in our society today, rising because why? Because the churches are remaining silent and the evil is growing ever so much every single day. The time of removing God's hedge. Look what it says in Jeremiah 11. Now this is something I want to be very careful when I bring up here, because it's not just this church in Texas. You're going to see more and more evil rise up across our nation as people cry out to God, and they're going to wonder what's going on, and they begin to hate God because it's going to continue to increase and mock God through it all. Look what it says in Jeremiah chapter 11. So the Lord said to me, a conspiracy has been found among the men of Judah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They have turned their back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who have refused to hear my words, and they have gone after other gods to serve them. Stop. Just like this picture of the Satanic Temple that I just showed you. And people say, we're not serving that God. We're just going there just to look. Well, I'm telling you, when you pay homage and you allow that to exist in your society, the spirit world follows that, what do you say? It just follows the pattern where you allow him to be. And once he's in, unless God can remove him, you can't. You cannot get that evil out. But look what happened, because we've reached the time where God says he will not hear our cries. Let me go on. Look what it says here now. They have gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant, which I made with their fathers. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will surely bring calamity on them, which they will not be able to escape. And though they cry out to me, I will not listen to them. Now, try to imagine now, a nation that we live in today, where the evil like we just witnessed over in Texas, in Las Vegas, and in New York, and California, and down in Florida the last couple of years, at an accelerated pace. People going to God and crying out to him, and there'll be no answer. Because that's the time we're going to move in before the return of Jesus Christ. Why? Because we have broken the covenant that God gave us. One of the covenants that God gave us was the covenant of the marriage between man and woman, which symbolized the marriage between God and Jesus Christ and his bride. And when you have broken that final covenant, there was nothing left to tie man back to God. That was the second time. The first time was when we broke the covenant of life itself, where we approve of murdering babies and abortion. So at this particular time, as we go into it, we're reaching the time as this nation will put down and silence Christians and raise up those who have made a god of abortion and the LGBT to go serve other gods, or to serve no God at all, and to make their own gods, just like they did in ancient Israel. And we are at that time today. So we need to understand what's coming is not going to be pleasant, and it's going to get worse. And when God doesn't answer, people are going to mock God more and more and more, just like those tweets that I saw on the news. It was on national news, how they mocked those, saying, well, if God isn't going to answer a prayer in the house of God, he's not going to answer prayer at all, as they mock God in this day we live in today. Now, let's talk about something else here. At the end time, God's going to choose his elect to be able to be veterans on the forefront doing an end-time battle before the return of Jesus Christ. I'm calling it the Eternals Veterans Day. So I was thinking about this as I was going through the library here, and you see Ruth and Daniel and Jacob, and you go through Ezekiel and Sarah and Isaac, and all of these, Rahab, and all those that you see going through here. As you talk about God's elect over the centuries, we come to a period of time that God remembers his elect. As we pay honor to our veterans on Veterans Day, God too pays honor to his veterans that have served over the years. And Revelation says there's going to be another set of veterans who are also going to be serving and dedicating their lives at the end time. God calls them his elect. In the book of Hebrews, the Hebrews is God's Veterans Day, as he pays honor over to the veterans. It's a fairly long chapter, so I'm not going to read it all, but I just want to read a couple things, what God talks about. In Hebrews 11, verse 1, it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And so as we go through, as things begin to have more damaging effect on people's minds, God's telling us from the beginning, the very first thing you're going to have, that God is in charge, and you're going to have faith to understand that He has a plan and He's bringing it about. Verse 6, it says, "Without faith it is impossible to please Him, for he that comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those that diligently seek Him." So as we go through the times that are ahead, we'll go through periods where God's talking about the wearing down of the saints, the calamities that take place. And when you see these things like in Texas and Las Vegas, your heart just goes out and just leaves you empty to think that there can be such cruelty and hatred going on in our society. And in verse 14, it says, this is talking about by faith what Abraham did. It says, "For they say that things are plainly that they seek a country." In other words, the saints, the founders, the people written in the book of Hebrews, that they knew that this was not the end where we are today. And that's what we need to keep in mind, is that this world is not the world of Jesus Christ, that He's coming back to this world, and He's going to put things in order the way they need to be. That these people died looking for a city that was not of this world. It says, "For they say such things, they declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have opportunity to return." The warning is for us, is that if we don't pay attention and we turn back, we'll look at this world and look for refuge in this world who's not going to offer any. Verse 16 says, "But now they desired a better country, that is an heavenly one, the one of a new heaven, a new earth, and to come back down to this earth." It says, "Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He prepared for them a city." In verse 33, it says, "And through faith they subdued kingdoms. They wrought righteousness. They obtained promises. They stopped the mouths of lions." And you know those stories as we read them every Sabbath as we go through the Bible. We understand what the saints went through. They quenched the fire, the violence of fire. They escaped the edge of the sword, and out of weakness they were made strong. They waxed valiant in fight. They turned their fight in the armies of the aliens, it says. Just like the veterans that we're paying respect to this particular weekend. God has done that. He has set us an example of what He does and how He respects those who have served Him. Verse 35, "Women received their dead to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds of imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, they were tempted, they were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute and afflicted and tormented, of whom God says, this world was not worthy." You know, I read that and I stopped for a moment because I thought about all our veterans now. Those who put their lives on the line and those that had died over the years, and the disrespect that's been given to them in this nation. And I think that those people who pay such disrespect were not worthy, that these men who died for them. It's unbelievable. And God says the same thing here, is that the world's not worthy of these men. "And they wandered in the deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves, and all of these having obtained a good report through faith, not receiving the promise." That promise is going to be with Jesus Christ when He returns soon to this world. And He's going to be bringing in a world of peace, a world that was meant to be of joy and happiness and love, with no more sickness and no more pain. And in the middle of it all, you can see Satan rising up and bringing out this evil to destroy those. And he's going to go after God's people. Now, let me show you this as we begin to bring this to a close today. The end-time veterans in God's service in Revelation 12, verse 12. "Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them, and woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea. For the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows he has but a short time." Going on in Revelation chapter 12, verse 13. "The dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, and he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she should fly to the wilderness, to her place, where she is nourished for a times and a half time from the presence of the serpent. For the serpent spewed out the water from his mouth like a flood, so that the woman, and caused her to be carried away by the flood. And even at the very end, God's going to say, as Satan's violence is turned up to its maximum, God's going to step in. He's going to protect his people. And God says he will say, no harm will come nigh thy dwelling. Verse 16, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, showing us at the end time there will be another frontline battle taking place that God has called his elect, when he says the very small remnant who have held fast to the lines, to the front, have not given in to the enemy, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. These 2 points must be understood. At the end time, we must have those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. And look at this. Exodus 31. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. With the commandments, the one commandment that the people do not want to follow today is the one changed by the Catholic Church from Saturday to Sunday, the day of sun worship or Sunday worship. God says here, and anyone who sees this program, please pay attention to this point. It's not any day you want to keep is holy. God says he sanctified, set apart the 7th day and made it holy. It is God's Sabbath, not man's. And here it says it is a sign. How does Satan know who to go after at the end time? He understands those who keep the commandments, which includes the Sabbath day. And here he says in Exodus 30, it is a sign between me and my people throughout your generations. Who does what? He sanctifies us. Those who keeps God's Sabbaths, all of his Sabbaths, including his holy days, God has set aside. And when you sanctify, you set aside something to make holy. God calls us his holy people. He has called us to serve at the end time, the warning message of just like the veterans who went on the forefront for the battle, God will be calling his people to stand firm and not give in to the evil that's coming. And second, the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is important in a time where people don't want to talk about prophecy. Look what it says here. Who have the testimony of Jesus Christ, and he says, this is an angel talking to John, says, I am a fellow servant and of your brethren who have the testimony of Jesus and worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The church of God must have these 2 things. If we're going to hold fast to the end, we must be keeping the commandments of God. That's not keeping law. The salvation is by faith. But if you don't have the obedience to the law, how can you be given the reward? All right? And second is you have to be filled with the Holy Spirit, the testimony of Jesus Christ, which is the spirit of prophecy. And the spirit of prophecy is talking about the inspiration of God and the warnings that's coming. These 2 things are important because, see, Satan knows these things. He says he's going to make war with those who have this. And those 2 things will signify, if you're looking for who is a true church and how do you find them? One of the things you're going to be looking for is the Sabbath. Another thing is you're going to be finding a church who's talking about the spiritual importance of prophecy at the end time, warning the world for the return of Jesus Christ. All right. It's important that we understand what's going on right now. When you see what took place in Texas, is to take the time to pay the prayers and the love and remorse of what's going on. But it's equally as important that we understand why these events are taking place and that you have been called. And if you're learning about these programs for the first time and you've not understood them before, God has given you an opportunity to be a part of his end time saints called to warn this world about the return of Jesus Christ. Because see, what's going on now, it will get worse. It will get bigger and more rapid, and the horrendous events that we see taking place are just going to overlap one another, very similar to what they're doing today. All right, from the web office, as we begin to bring our program to a close, we sent out in the mail first responders. It's kind of interesting, we just mailed that out. It kind of ties into what we've been talking about in News Nuggets and Insight last week and this week. So if you didn't get a copy, you can write in or call in, and we'll be glad to send you one. And maybe we can even put it online, make it available online somewhere. I'm here seeing my brother shake his head over there in the booth. That yeah, we could put it online. That way you don't have to wait for it. You'll be able to go online and find it. So hopefully soon we'll get that right online. First responders, and we're talking about God's people being called to the front. Also from the home office in the mail last week, we mailed out the newsletter. And in the newsletter, we had our monthly offering this time. It was the 2 years into the millennium. It was a sermon that I redid from the Feast of Tabernacles. It's hard-hitting, a lot of information, and I highly encourage everyone, please get these 2 sermons. They're very important for the time we live in today, and they will give you information that you may not have ever seen before and help understand the book of Revelation in the time we live in today in a perspective that makes things easier to understand where we are in prophecy. So please get these 2 sermons, 2 years into the millennium. It's a 2-part sermon, and you can get it from the website or you can order them online at www.thecogmi.org or call in at 504-367-2005. From the vault, I always like these little things from the vault. We offered last week, we're doing this for a couple more weeks, is these 3-part sermon called America Sold Out. All right, this is not the American Decline that we did a year ago or 2 years ago. This is a 2013 series talking about has America lost its way. We talked about the fiscal cliff that we were heading on, about the Middle East and how the Middle East was changing with the Middle East Spring, and the embarkation of America as we moved away, or we just like sailed away from God. And like we're saying, and we showed in that sermon in 2012, November 6, 2012, in that sermon, is that because of what we're doing, moving away from God, that we would see the increase of evil and violence in our society, and you're seeing it today. So you go online. These are not we don't have these made to mail out. You can get them online. You can download them or watch them right online. 3-part series, America Sold Out. This week, I will be in Syracuse at the new building that we have teamed up with the Syracuse congregation to purchase. And we will be going through and having a special open house weekend up in Syracuse. So if you're in the area, please, if you any way possible, come on down or come on up wherever you're located in that area. It's kind of like an open house, get to see the building as they begin to talk about the renovations that they're going to be going through so that they can have a dedication on Pentecost weekend next year. So come on out. We'll have a potluck meal afterwards and fellowship, and there'll be a lot of people. And come on by and say hello if you're in the area. It's at 304 West Main Street in Syracuse. Services are for 1 o'clock. I believe they have services every week at 1 o'clock. If you need more information, you can contact Steve Council, who's the minister for that congregation. His phone number is 269-445-7943. That's 269-445-7943. Well, that's it for our program. We got one more video, and then I'll be back to say goodbye. But take a look at this last video again on Veterans Day as we pay respect. One final video. It's called "We Took an Oath." To all the veterans, we salute you. We thank you from God's Unchanging Word for our news nuggets and insights. We thank you for what you have done and the service you have given to. And all of those who see this program, have you known someone who has served in the military? Take a moment this weekend. Walk up to them, shake their hand, and thank them for what they did for our great nation. We have so much to be thankful for. Well, that does it for News Nuggets and Insights for this week. In the next week or two, we'll be talking about another holiday, one we all get to participate with our families. There's not too many of those we get. Thanksgiving Day. We'll be talking about that in the future. So until next week, God be with you. And if you're in Syracuse area, stop by and say hello. God be with you till next week.